Well, hi. I think I've got everything recording correctly. Um, I'm looking at your discussion board post, and once again, I've got to say I'm impressed. Um, I love what you've done here, and you raised some really great points. You've done a really good um job of digging into this passage and uh, deciphering its meaning. Hold on while I fix my spectacle leash there. Um, and I decided to do this video because you were talking about delegation. And that's a sensitive subject for me because I've talked with so many who have attempted to delegate tasks, but by and large, pastors don't do that well for a number of reasons. Um, and see if this squares with your experience. Uh, One of the things that will happen is the pastor will uh, give a task to somebody, but they've never been trained how to appropriately delegate a task. When you delegate a task, you also delegate the authority to perform the task, but you never relinquish overall control of the task being delegated. So on the front end, it requires a lot more work to make sure that the person to whom you're delegating is qualified to accept that assignment and succeed with it. And you may have to train the person. You may have to walk them through step by step to make sure they understand what the standards are and what you're expecting. Many pastors I've talked to, many leaders I've talked to, as a matter of fact, don't like to delegate because of that level of work on the front end. I had a supervisor of mine confide in me, and he said, frankly, I'm lazy. He said, the reality is I don't like to work. So if I work on the front end and I get you trained and you can do something to a very high level of competency, or even a C average, which is passing, that's progress. And I'm okay with that. We can work from there. But going on with what he said, because I'm lazy, I delegate things to other people, and I've become good at delegating so that I don't have to do it. Well, I don't agree with this rationale, but I agree with the way that he delegates. And that is that once you delegate a task to somebody, it belongs to that person. And they have ultimate responsibility for it, success or fail. Now, as a leader, we know that if the team succeeds wildly, it's because we have a great team. If the team fails, it's because I failed as a leader. I take the blame, I take the hit, even if the blame resides with a team member. And let me illustrate this. We had a particular tasking in our shop when I was on active duty. I had told one of our people that they needed to do something to prepare for this inspection that was coming, and they didn't do it. The inspector arrived, and this particular task wasn't done, even though I'd followed up on it. I had been assured that it was going to be done, everything was handled. But the inspector walked in and handed our behinds to us. And my boss, as soon as he found out about it, I got a phone call. My boss wanted me in his office right away. So I went over there. I said, sir, I delegated this task, so-and-so, mea culpa. I'm responsible. It's my fault. My boss looked at me. He says, you going to fix it? I said, absolutely. He said, okay, I don't need to say anything else. And that was the end of it. I walked back to the shop fully expecting to take care of this situation, talk to the person, do whatever personnel documentation I needed to do. And the person met me in the shop. And he says, Sergeant O'Donnell, I blew it. And I know I blew it. And I am prepared to take whatever disciplinary action comes my way, whatever you decide to do. He said, I hung the shop out to dry. I said, well, you're absolutely right. And it was a learning experience. So I didn't need to go to guns on this person. They'd already learned, and I never had any problems with them after that. But mistakes are part of the learning equation. Now, back to ministry. When we delegate a task, we also have to remember that we must follow up with the person to which that task is delegated. Often what I've seen happen is a task is delegated to somebody, and then the leader just goes hands off, and okay, I delegated that to so-and-so, and they're handling it, so I wash my hands of responsibility for it. Well, that's incorrect. At these executive levels, you never relinquish ultimate responsibility. You still have a board to answer to. You still have a congregation to answer to. And ultimately, depending on your polity, most churches that I know of, the polity is such that the pastor is in control of the staff. Otherwise, the lead pastor is responsible for the staff unless that task is delegated to somebody else. That's typically the way that it works best. I've heard of it being set up other ways and heard of nothing but problems. But regardless, the executive leader never releases ultimate responsibility for that task. On the contrary, that leader should be checking in with that person and finding out, how are things going? Is there anything that you need? Is there something that I can do to help you do your job? When do you think it will be done? Are we on target for the time frame? These types of things. That does a couple of things for the leader. And that is that the one thing that it does is it lets the subordinate know that the boss is still engaged with this, and this still needs to be on my scope. I need to keep my arms around this monkey, and make sure that I carry the ball to the end zone and fulfill my responsibilities. Because my boss is engaged, he or she hasn't forgotten about it, and my boss is going to ask me about this. And scheduling is a part of that. Okay, it's Monday morning. Children's pastor, how's this project going? New puppet stage built yet? Or how is this planning going? Whatever the situation is. Now, the leader won't get down into the weeds of how all of that's done. That's the responsibility of the children's pastor, or the youth pastor, or whomever. But as we move up in these different roles that we move into, as our education increases, we're moved up into different roles, and different things are expected of us. So as we look at this delegation process, it's important that we as leaders going into a ministry setting understand, and we can use this passage in Acts 6-8 with the orphans and widows and the Hellenists and all of this that you talk about. And it can be illustrating for us that the early church did delegate tasks. You can go all the way back into Moses and Jethro. Delegation right there. Jethro says to Moses, hey, this isn't good. What you're doing is not good. You're going to wear yourself out and the people. And we have this in the distribution of food, that the disciples rightly understood, hey, we can't handle this. And our job is to be teachers of the word. We need to be focusing on that teaching element. This is something that somebody else can do. This brings me to my final point, and that is that the leader must identify those tasks that only he or she can do. For example, teaching a class. I'm the only one that can grade papers for that class. I cannot delegate that task to anybody. There are some facets of pastoral ministry that I cannot delegate to anybody. I have a vice chairman on the board that could step in and fill in my stead, but the likelihood of that taking place is somewhere between slim and none, because I need to be in that seat. I need to be there at that board meeting, and the board should not be meeting without me. But there are other things that other people can do. I can have somebody else give announcements. I can have somebody else lead worship. I can have somebody else lead a Bible study. For example, we have an adult Sunday school class that it is completely and totally my option whether or not I want to teach that class. I have a fully qualified adult Sunday school teacher, and so if he can handle the course, unless it's a course that I specifically want to teach, then I see no reason not to allow him to do that. So this goes to my ministry philosophy, and this is just Sam O'Donnell's input here. But I believe, as Ephesians 4 pastors, that we're instructed to train and equip God's people for works of service. And I think one of the ways that we do that is by giving away as much ministry as we can, and finding people who have a calling or a penchant, a desire to do a particular task. We've got a guy in the church that loves to pray, so we're putting him to work. And I feed him prayer requests. Hey, this is going on, that's going on. And he will go into the church during the week, and he will take my notes from our prayer time on Sunday, and he prays through those. So I leave those for him. So, making good use of your team and making good use of the skills that God gives you. And the more that we can train, equip, mentor, encourage people to get involved and stay involved in ministry, the better off our church is. And I think you've probably seen that in youth ministry. The more you can get the kids involved, the more you have them doing, the better things go. No one person can do it all, and so it's essential that we be able to delegate. And I like that you brought that out in this particular post. So I just wanted to share that with you, kind of a lengthy rambling on my part, but maybe it'll engender some good conversation. I'm going to stop babbling and get this posted, and I'm looking forward to your reply. So long for now.